Essentially, hills and mountains make me happy. You know, if I'm in hills, in amongst hills, and they don't even have to be big high mountains, but if I'm in amongst hills, I just feel better. They make me happy. And I find it difficult to be depressed or negative when I'm in amongst mountains. We have such a diversity in landscape. And the thing that I love so much about the Scottish hills is they're not high, but they've got this Arctic climate. They're challenging. And on top of that, we have such fantastic folklore, such a great history in the country, and you can see this history in every glen that you go to. So all these things wrap up together to make Scotland a very, very special place. Really, in my teenage years, I was an athlete. I was a long jumper. I became Scottish junior long jump champion in 1968 and got a couple of internationals. But I had a series of injuries, quite bad injuries, Achilles heel injuries, which is pretty bad for a long jumper. I then kind of knew in my heart of hearts that I wasn't going to make it to the top echelons of athletics. So round about the time I was getting more interested in the hills and less interested in athletics. And I remember one day taking myself off from the sports stadium at Meadowbank in Edinburgh and climbing Arthur's Seat and just sitting up there and kind of contemplating this view in front of me, and I could see across the Firth of Forth to the Lomond Hills of Fife and the Highland Hills in the background. And I kind of sat there, and it'd been a hard day. I'd had a hard session. I think I'd fallen out with my coach, and I thought, this is kind of nice, listening to the skylarks and looking. I think I'm just going to change the focus of my life now, and spend more time in the hills. So that was a decision I've never regretted. I worked as a policeman for a while in Glasgow, and one of the jobs they gave me was working with police cadets during the summer camp. So I'd spend a couple of months in the summer hill walking and climbing and canoeing with these police cadets, and then suddenly I'd find myself back in the beat in Govan in Glasgow for the winter. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I could do this all the time. I wonder if I could, just be outside climbing the hills and paddling a canoe. I wonder if I could do that for a living. So I left the police and did a few jobs. Actually ended up working in the Scottish Youth Hostels Association, where I started writing, and that was 40 odd years ago, and I've been kind of writing about the hills ever since. So I had quite a lot of experience in radio, and I was leading a trek to climb Mount Elbrus in Russia, and we realised that the hotel we'd based ourselves at the foot of the mountain, there was another small camera crew there, and they were making a film with Chris Bonington, and it so happened that the director of that wee film crew was a guy called Richard Else, who's well known here, and Richard and I talked one night over a few beers about the great W.H. Murray, Bill Murray, who, as far as I was concerned, was the greatest ever of our mountain writers. And I'd met Bill a couple of times, and Richard said he'd had an idea about making a programme about Bill. Anyway, about 3 weeks after we got home from that trip, Richard rang me up and said the BBC are quite keen on the idea of a Bill Murray programme, but they want to make it part of a bigger series, a 6-part series that looks at 100 years of Scottish mountaineering, and would I like to present it? So that was a fantastic opportunity for me, and I said yes, of course, and the TV thing sort of took off from there. Since then I've been doing quite a lot of work for the Adventure Show, and we do these Adventure Show specials every Christmas, and for a number of years we did long walks. We walked the length of Scotland, we walked across Scotland several times, we did various trails.
Well, here we are, Isle Marie, one of the smaller islands on Loch Marie. And this is a place that I've been eager to visit for a long, long time. Of all the islands of Scotland, this one is the island with probably more stories and legends attached to it than any other.
When I was starting off, if somebody had told me that that's what I'd do for the next 40 years, I wouldn't have believed them. I edited magazines for 20 odd years. I edited Climber and Rambler magazine, and then changed the name of it because we reckoned it sounded too much like a Rose magazine. So it became Climber, and then I did the Great Outdoors for 20 years. And I've also had the opportunity to lead treks all over the world. I think anybody who goes to Scotland's hills and mountains and gets a lot from these places, I think it's incumbent on them to do something to protect these places because they are under threat. There's no doubt about that. We're losing wildland at a phenomenal rate at the moment. And it's something that kind of depresses me a wee bit because I know people go to the hills for recreation, they go to the hills to get away from all these things. But if we don't get involved in the politics, and it's a horrible word, but it's basically what it is. If we don't get involved in the politics of conservation and protecting these places, then we'll simply lose them. And that's been a great theme in my life for a long time. When I started writing about the mountains, it's when I first met Chris Brasher. He knew I'd been writing about the Scottish hills, and he had found out that the great Knoydart Peninsula was going to be bought by the MOD to play war games, and he got very much involved in a campaign to save Knoydart, and it was successful. There's a number of other campaigns followed that, and then I became chair of the Nevis Partnership for a number of years, and again that was a fascinating process to see how quite different organisations could come together and work together to protect our highest and probably our greatest mountain. And not only the mountain, but the glen beside it, Glen Nevis. So that was a really, really interesting time. So my plea to most people going to the hills would be the time to remain silent is past. We've really got to do what we can. Now, whether that's supporting Mountaineering Scotland or the Ramblers, joining and giving them your support, or writing to your MSP and just bombarding these people with complaints about the things that are going on the hills. We can all do it in different ways, but it's important that we do something. And if we don't, then we can't complain when we see our hills covered in bulldoze tracks and wind farms. So it's been a varied career, but the foundation of that varied career is my own love and passion for the hills and getting out in the hills. And I've just written a book, and the title of that book is There's Always the Hills. And I know that no matter what life throws at you, no matter how disappointed you feel in people or in events, you know that going to the hills can be your kind of salvation. You go to the hills and there's a healing process takes place. So whenever something in my life happens that is not very pleasing, I know that there's always the hills, and that's been the bedrock for everything.